Well, hello and welcome, or hopefully welcome back. This is another in a series of videos trying to help us plan and design for all learners in our Catholic schools, particularly students with disabilities, but yes, they're struggling developing peers. My name is Sean Smith, and I'm a part of the Learning Research Network, or the LRN, and we're trying to help here further understand how to plan and design meaningfully for students, again, that struggle and those with disabilities in our Catholic schools. So we've been talking about Universal Design for Learning in the framework. And we've reviewed the three principles, the various guidelines and checkpoints, but I thought I'd offer a narrative through my own son as an illustration of way to implement. So let's start with an assignment Nolan had several years ago. Now this is an elementary assignment, and we can unpack this in middle and secondary, and we'll try to expand upon that through the academic year with illustrations on Universal Design for Learning. But Nolan was asked with his fourth grade peers to identify a president. And then with identifying a president, he was asked to understand the president through engaging in the library and hitting several standards, by the way, in respect to library standards. Better understanding from an English language arts perspective, some standards. And then finally, yes, there was some social studies standards affiliated with it as well. So from a report perspective, he was being asked to do library research. He was being asked to organize that material, and then he was being asked to answer a series of questions. His president was George Washington. And then finally, he was being asked to both, write a report and then do a poster. Now, this was, about a month-long, 4-week experience where he was doing this a good portion of his day, either in the library or in the classroom. And it was going to culminate with the poster presentations in the library at his school, but the public library was going to be there as well to reinforce what the public library provided, everything from summer resources to a variety of other things. So this was all integrated. And of course, there's a number of different pieces to this puzzle, so to speak. And from a perspective for Nolan, an individual with an intellectual disability, and if you haven't had a chance to watch our series on that, there's probably a number of things you'd say, well, wait a minute here. From a writing perspective and a number of reading perspective and a number of other things, he's going to have problems. And so from a UDL alignment and implementation of that framework, thinking about multiple means of representation for him to gain knowledge, think about multiple means of action expression for him to be able to share what he knows, and hopefully doing it in a way that you're engaging the individual. And so Nolan was already engaged because he was very interested in George Washington. But what we needed to break down first was multiple means of representation. We needed to get information about George Washington. Now, by the way, his peers were being asked to go to the fourth grade section of the library, and that's how it was organized, grab books about George Washington or whoever their president was assigned, unpack those, take notes, etc., etc. Well, Nolan, instead of going to the fourth grade section, went to the kindergarten section, and there he got a number of picture books. And by the way, he also watched some videos, and he also got some audio that he listened to. And he basically was able to grab the information he needed about George Washington in a variety of ways, allowing multiple means of representation, so it wasn't just limited with his ability to read at the fourth grade reading level and pull out text. He was able to use the library, utilize the library in a manner that was appropriate, gain the information, and then begin to organize what he knew. Now, the poster and the writing was going to be a bit of a challenge. The writing associated with the poster that was combined. So instead, we started problem solving and saying, well, could Nolan present, and as this picture indicates, could Nolan actually be George Washington? Could he share that he is George Washington? And fortunately, several other parents, when I was requesting this as a parent, several other parents were in the room, and they all were like, this would be great. Could our children also share what they know about their president instead of the poster and the paper? And of course, it got to a point where, yes, okay, sure, all right. So it wasn't the entire class, but it was a handful of students. So from the presentation part, action expression, demonstration, he presented his material. And by the way, he was very engaged in understanding George Washington, but particularly engaged in his willingness to share this with his peers. So the day came where in the library, they were going to have an open house for a portion of the day. Parents would come in and they would take a look at the posters, they would take a look at the papers, and the students would be there kind of sharing with their various people coming, including their parents, grandparents, aunts and uncles, the adults in their house, whoever it may be. Now, during that time and during Nolan's class time, he was able to present as well as, I think someone was Abe Lincoln, someone was Teddy Roosevelt, someone was JFK, I think about 6 or 7 other students of a class of 20-something. Now, when Nolan got to his presentation, Oh, I should add in here that in preparation for his presentation, he certainly took his costume, and actually it's the same costume we used for Halloween, right? He was George Washington for Halloween. And we got him all ready. And as we left that day, before we left the house, and we're trying to scramble out of the house, he stopped us and said, I need a picture of Martha Washington. So I ran around the house and printed out a picture of Martha Washington. And in the process, I gave it to him, and he said, sorry, Dad, I need a colored picture. Okay, so then I run up and back to the printer, and I printed out a colored picture, and by this time, I'm ready to get out of the house. He has several other siblings. It is time to get out of the house, and he stops me and says, Dad, I need it framed. Well, anyways, I went and grabbed a frame in our living room, threw out the picture, whatever it was, put Martha in there, and said, here you go, Nolan, you're done, out of the house. So later that day, when I get to the school, and I'm ready to watch his presentation, and by the way, he's a limited reader at that time, so he has some notes, he has some outline, but we had practiced it numerous times, and I did not think of it at the time, but Martha Washington wasn't part of the presentation. But anyways, he gets up there, and as you can see from this picture, he starts to present, and Martha's by his side. And he's talking, and he's following that script, and I'm reading along with it, and he's doing what I hoped he would be doing, but all of a sudden he stopped, and he goes off script, and he starts talking about Martha. He starts talking about his love for Martha. He starts talking about how he's a stepdad to Martha's children. And then he picks up the picture, he kisses her, puts it down, and talks about how he loves Martha Washington. Now, oh my gosh, I'm in the background going, what are you doing? This is off script. But I'm looking around, and I think some of the moms, if not some of the dads, are wanting to cry in terms of this young man talking about Martha and George and all that. Now, I would ask you, did Nolan learn about George Washington? And I would argue, yes, he did. Not only did he learn the basics that he needed to learn, but he went off and learned about Martha, and he was able to communicate about Martha. He was able to integrate it into his presentation. He learned his stuff. He was able to demonstrate that. He learned it through multiple means of representation. He was engaged in the process, and overall, he was successful. Now, he didn't write a paper, nor did he read the fourth grade reading books, nor did he do a poster to put this all together. Some of his peers did. He did not. I can tell you, in a year or two, when I revisited that classroom with my younger children, I realized, wow, there was many more options to do presentations than there were when Nolan was doing it. And I heard a couple years after that, posters and papers were put out the window, and it was presentations. But of course, Nolan had to organize his presentation. Nolan had to sequence it. Nolan had to write down the elements of the script. And his peers were still doing that as of when I last visited, but they're doing it in a presentation format. So this isn't, again, all-inclusive, but the idea here is to get us thinking a little bit about the framework and how the basic elements of the framework and how it can be incorporated and implemented. And in so doing, allow for the Nolans of the world to hit those big ideas, to hit the elements of what was critical for the assignment, to align with the standards, and through multiple means of representation and action expression, be able to demonstrate what he knows and learn what he needed to know, as all his peers did. Now again, it's not perfect. There are additional resources below that offer some connections, as well as within the Learning Research Network or the LRN's website, to walk you through additional illustrations of how other teachers have done it and getting us thinking about further implementing this UDL framework to plan and design for the variability of all learners. Hope this was helpful, and thanks again for visiting with us.